evening to those of you also in Europe right now. We're here to give you a little webinar today. We're going to have a look at creating a carousel component using XState and the Stately Studio, of course. And we're going to use React and TypeScript for that. So if you've been looking for a way into using XState in React, this is a great place for you to start. If you want to understand why state machines are useful, this is a good place for you to start. If you just really like carousels, also very good place to start. I'm Laura, you can tell that because it says it down there. And this here is, who are you?
All right, I'm Farzad too. Really glad to be here. I know that I said that I'm a web engineer, but actually I'm the real CEO of Stately. You probably already know that if you're following our office hours.
Yeah, I'm just gonna nod along.
Yeah, David's not here, so all good.
Yeah.
Great. So we're gonna build a carousel component together. So funny story. I gave the example of a carousel component for as something that can be modeled using state charts. I think 3 or 4 years ago, when I was preparing a talk for a conference in Italy. So I realized that while I was going along the talk, because I didn't make a smart move at first to think everything through and then choose the example for the talk. I realized that along the talk, it was a good example because it kind of covers most of the essential core primitives of the state charts, from states, final states, to context, which is the infinite state, and then transitions, guarded transitions, choice nodes, which are basically template state nodes with eventless events, or the always events, as we call them, and potentially parallel states, some invocations, callback invocations, promise invocations. So I'm just hoping that going through this whole modeling of a carousel component and adding features on top of it, we're going to use most of these primitives of the state charts inside that component. So we're going to be using React because that's just easier for me than TypeScript, and we're going to rely on Stately Studio. And if there's anything that we don't yet support in the studio, we can always switch back to code.
And we are streaming live here, so if you have any questions or any comments throughout, please feel free to let us know. We will try to read your questions and give you answers if we're able. And so we really appreciate if you want to join in.
Yeah, it's live coding, so many things can go wrong. Please help us out.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen, Laura.
You go for it.
And let's see. Maybe this window. Yes. Great. Okay. So, Laura, do you see my screen?
I can see your screen. If you're sharing the whole display, are you?
I'm sharing, this is screen. So you should be seeing the Stately Studio right now with the entire Chrome browser.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Great. And do I need to zoom in, or is it okay?
You could maybe zoom in a touch, but we'll see when we keep making things.
All right.
Great. Oh yeah, that's fabulous. Yeah, you might want to do browser zoom level.
Oh yeah. Okay. Actually, let's do that.
That's pretty handy as well.
Just yeah. Oh no, not here. Great. Then.
And hi to you, Mateza, and I hope I've said that right. You can correct me if I didn't. And I agree, Farzad is great.
Thank you. I don't see anything in the comments, so apologies for that. All right, let's start thinking about the carousel in terms of what finite states are present in it. So to me, a carousel, I keep in mind that this might not be like the greatest example of modeling something in the state charts, because you might argue that a carousel is just an array of numbers in JavaScript where you have a cursor that goes from 0, 1, 2, and blah, blah to the end. And then you can just keep on, moving the cursor inside an array. And I don't want to argue. I would say that you're right. But maybe this is also a chance for us to showcase what the state charts are useful for, because we're not just going to model a very, very simple and basic carousel, but we'd rather want to see how the state charts and the modeling inside the state charts will help you tame the complexity of a React component while the features are growing and growing and growing. So usually features are added, over time, but then and it's hard to realize the complexity over time. Maybe you're not the only person who works on it. So we'll see that how a state chart, and especially the tooling around it by visualizing the model and everything like that, they all help you keep the complexity constrained and contained inside this component. Okay, enough about the concept. I'm going to assume that everybody knows the state charts here. So let's call this a carousel component. We're going to call that a carousel. So
if you don't know what state charts are yet, you're going to get the idea by the end of this.
Exactly. Actually, I'm aiming so that you would get the basic idea of what the state charts are in a few minutes. So if I fail at that, just let me know. So a carousel component is a list of items or slides, as we call them. But based on where you are inside that carousel right now and what item is active and being shown right now, we might be in different states. So let's call them maybe start, and then we're going to have another one maybe called middle, and another state called end. Simple enough. Great. So start means you're looking at the very first item inside the carousel. End means you're looking at the very last item inside the carousel, and any other item in between is just going to be called middle. And the reason we are separating them into these three states is because we want our events to be available, like the right number of events to be available based on the current state that the carousel is in. So what that means is if you're in the start state here, you probably can only accept the next event, not the previous event, because we don't want the carousel to go back to the end. We yet don't want it to be cyclic. We just want it to go from one way and then come back. Start, middle, end, and then come back to middle and start. So as I said, in the start state, you probably just want to accept a next event, and then you go to the middle state. If your carousel has like 5 different items in it, if you're looking at the first one, you're in the start state. The moment you receive next, you go to the middle state, and then another next will just keep you inside middle, right? So it's going to be a self event. But the second next will take you to the third element, third item. Another next will take you to the fourth one. But the subsequent next after that will have to take you to the end state. So the next event, it's the same event, but it's a guarded transition. It means depending on what item you're looking at right now and what item will be active after this next event is received by the state machine, you might stay on the middle state or go to the end state. What do you think, Laura? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's conditionals for anyone who wants to use them elsewhere in their code.
Yeah, let's call this will be last item or something like that. So if this will be the last item, we're going to go to the end state. Otherwise, remove that. Great. Else, we stay on the middle state. Great. So similarly, okay, I think we don't need this anymore.
You don't need that, yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, when you're in the end state, you should have a way to get back to the middle state. So if you're looking at the fifth element inside the carousel, you should have like a way to go back to the fourth element. So we can model that using an event called prev, short for previous. And then also from middle to start, there should be a way. But if you're going from the fourth item to the third item, you might still receive the prev event, but you still stay in the same middle state. 3 to 2, still in middle, but 2 to 1 should similarly take you to the start state. So again, we need a guarded transition to go back from middle to start.
So the way of building it in this way essentially allows you to have a carousel with an infinite number of, or not an infinite number, but loads or very few like slides, I guess. Is that what you call different sections?
Exactly. Because as long as you have more than 2 items, you will always have 3 different states. Now we're assuming that we're going to have more than 3 items here. More than 2 items, because if you have 2, then if you have 1 item, you're only a start, middle, and end are going to be the same thing.
Yeah, it's not a carousel.
Exactly, it's not a carousel.
It's nothing to go round.
Exactly. So let's just assume that this is more than 2 or 3 elements, and we always have these 3. And as you said, regardless of what's the total count of the items inside the carousel, this is only 3 final states are needed. Great. So let's call this prev event again, going from middle to middle, but then this should be a guarded transition, which says, so if this will be the first item, we want to go to the start state, otherwise we'll stay on the middle state. So let's rearrange this a little bit. So great, hopefully this makes sense now.
Yeah, it's quite a pretty one.
Awesome. Okay, so let's put this into test just on the model level. We are in the start state. We're looking at the very first element inside the carousel. Somebody sends the next event. So we transition to the middle state. Now, from middle, depending on how many items there are, we might go to the end state or not. So if there is like 4 different items, the next one will keep us in the middle, then the next one will take us to the end. So we're here and we can only go back, and then one prev will keep us here, and then the next prev will take us to the start. Since this is simulation, we need to we don't execute the guards here, so we need to just manually click on these buttons right now. Great. So if this makes sense so far, I prepared a stack blitz sandbox where there is like a basic JSX for rendering a list of items. Like there are some.
Would you just zoom the browser
right,
slightly?
sure.
Just make that a little bit. Yeah, there
Better
we go.
now?
Just in case folks are using smaller screens.
Yes, great. So it's a basic React component where we have a constant for the dimensions of the image. I'm using some random API for fetching some pizza pictures here. Please don't feel hungry.
Yeah, good luck. By the end of this, you're going to be hungry.
Oh yeah, I'm already hungry.
Unless you don't like pizza.
Oh my God. Yeah, we're not going to disappoint Italian people here. We all like pizza. So our carousel machine is using create machine from XState. We only need 2 libraries, XState for the machine and XState React for the binding of the state machine to React. So we create an empty machine for now. We are statically rendering 7 different images inside the carousel. So I have like a static array of numbers mapping to get image URL, which gives me a random pizza picture. And then there's an app component. I'm getting a ref to the container of the carousel, and we'll see how that's going to be useful later on. So we use the use machine hook from XState React to connect the state machine that we're building onto this React component. Then that will give us a state, which is the current state of the state machine, and then we also get the send function, which is a way for us to be able to send events to the state machine. Okay, so there's a div element, and I'm using the custom properties in CSS to pass on the constant dimension into CSS, so I can do some CSS magic later on. I'm putting debug text here to get the current value of the state machine, and you can see it here in the view. There's a container with a ref, and there's a rail, which basically is an overflowing list of items. And I'm mapping over the images, which is for now just a static array, and then rendering li items with the paragraph element and the image element here. There's also a bunch of static buttons here at the bottom, but they don't do anything right now. There's just next, prev, and reset, and we're going to implement this in the state machine together. So we have the variables of the state machine here. Let's go to the export tab here. This is like the toolbox. We call it toolbox. And the last option inside the toolbox is a way for you to get the exported code of the state machine inside the studio. I'm going to use the export of TypeScript here, then copy it, paste it over onto into the stat list here. Okay, so because it comes with the create machine, and I already had the create machine there, I have a syntax error. Okay, great. So what did it give me? So the ID is carousel, initial state is a start. Then on start state, we only accept next event, which takes us to middle. And then middle has a guarded transition here, uses an array of transitions. If will be last item condition returns true, we go to the end state. Otherwise, we stay on the middle state, which is like an empty object for now because it doesn't have to do anything. Then on previous event, we if this will be the first item, we go to start and blah blah, and the rest you know that already because we did it in the studio together. We don't care about these because these are just basic flags of the machine. And well, the only thing that we need to do to verify if it works is to pass on an onClick here and send the next event to the state machine. It's going to copy and paste this over to Priv as well and send the Priv event to the machine and click on this button. So now when I click on next button, the state is updated. And since I have 7 different items here, I'm going to have to click 5 more times. Oh, okay, because the guards are missing. So we need to pass on the implementation of the guards here. We don't have to provide that and hard code it inside the state machine config. We can keep that serializable and then pass them here to use machine. So the way to do that is to pass a guards property, and then the name of the guards will be the name of the guard here, and then we pass on the implementation. But before doing that, we need to do something. So we need to pass the context object because we need to keep track of the current cursor. We still need to know what element is active inside the infinite state of the state machine. The state machine, excuse me. So we call that cursor. Probably start with 0, and then and maybe the total number of items. Let's call that 7 for now. Great. Worth mentioning that we can also pass on context here as the implementation options, which will overwrite the default values here. So maybe also we need to make sure that we are passing them here. Maybe keep the total as 5 to verify that the 7 is overwriting that one. Great. So cursor will tell me that we will start from the very first element. Great. So the guard that says will be the last item means I'm currently on the second last item, right? So that means ctx of cursor is ctx of total minus 1. And then will be first item, which is the other guard that we use inside the machine. It's going to be okay. So if we are on the index 1, the previous event will take us to event index 0, which means that this guard needs to return true. That's why we're checking against 1 here. Great. So let's see if this works. Clicking on next will get. I'm going to actually make this a little smaller so we see what's going on.
That's great. So you can see the buttons.
Exactly. So next will take me to middle, and then you can see that this is not updating anymore because we're not updating anything inside the context of the machine. So we're going to have to pass on some actions to update this. So I'm going to go over to Studio again, maybe take this machine and then import it into the machine so that I get all my changes at once as well. Great. So what we need to do is, we say when we're in the start state and we receive the next event, we need to transition to the middle state, right? But we also need to execute an action, which is an assign action, that updates the current cursor inside the context. So we're going to call that increment cursor. Great. So when we get to the middle state, our cursor is looking at 1 value, the value 1. So inside the middle, we actually need to do this for all of them. So on next, we always have to execute the increment cursor, and on priv we need to decrement the cursor by 1. Great.
And in the future there will be an easier way to copy and paste these across the different events.
Exactly.
Just in case you're thinking, oh, this looks like it's taken a bit of time.
Yes.
That is in the works.
There are some exciting plans. Great. So priv will decrement, and great. Okay. So next, increments, increment, increment, great, and then priv will decrement. Awesome. Okay. Also, in future, we have plans to make it easier for you to switch between like a running application, like a running React application inside Code Sandbox in your project, or like somewhere else, basically. and the machine that you're modeling here. So if you're using the
right now,
Studio,
you could always use the VS Code extension if you want
yes,
to try like visualizing your machine inside of your code base as well.
exactly. Yes. Okay. So let's see what's the problem here. So we are running these actions, which is great, and then we need to provide the implementation for these actions. Increment cursor. So we need to import a sign from XState, which is a way for you to send an event to the machine and say that I want to update the value of the cursor inside the context. So whatever the context is, I want it to be +1. And similarly with different cursor. -1 here. If you're also using the VS Code extension, there's a way for you to use the XState, the type gen feature, which warns you about the missing actions or any sort of like invalid transitions or any sort of fishy stuff inside the machine config.
So even if you're exporting from the studio, it's worth using the VS Code extension.
Yes. I want to see where this area is coming from. So maybe it's a hot reload error. Oh yeah, it's because of missing creation.
Oh, you took it out.
Did I? Okay, great, awesome. Let's refresh to make sure it works. So let me also pass on the a schema for context. So this will be cursor number. So the TypeScript understands that we have the inside the context of the machine. Buy a better keyboard. Okay, now these errors are gone, and hopefully this is working now. So we send the next event. Next will supposedly takes us from start to middle and also execute the increment cursor action, which will update the cursor from 0 to 1. And it's not working, maybe because of some typo. Let me check. No, this is okay. Assign cursor, ctx cursor +1. Interesting. This is not working. Why is that? Or are they seeing anything funny going on here? Increment cursor.
If anyone watching has any ideas, do let us know in the comments.
Assign is coming from XState, which is correct. And then this is state.value. Oh, it's because oh my god, it's because we're not actually. Okay, so let's see state.context here. Context is updating. It's because we're not yet scrolling between items. So this is the index of the current image. That's why we're not scrolling. So we don't see the updated value here. But the cursor is working just fine, and you can see that we are getting the end state because this is like the last element, and then I can't do anything any next here, and then pre will take me to start again. Okay, so this is working fine now. The state machine is working. It's just the view layer is not reacting to that. Okay.
Shall we, just before you move on, a couple of questions?
Sure.
So the first one, and I hope you understand what Morteza means by this, and actually we have an NFA for Carousel, and with creating a guard in the middle state for the next transition, you can simulate DFA. Is it correct? I don't know what NFA and DFA are.
I don't know either.
Okay, Morteza, will you let us know? Sorry, we're not very clever. And also, Morteza asks, why, when you're defining the schema, do you use curly brackets as?
It's because a schema is passed as a runtime value. So you're going to have to pass on an empty object and then cast it to like a type that a TypeScript understands. Because this is not the type level, this is the runtime level. And the schema is like supposed to represent the schema of the context, and then you can also say events and then services. So it's like more than one just a schema of the context. It's like a lot of other things in the config. Hopefully that
So
makes sense.
let us know if that didn't answer your question, Morteza. I mean, it sounded like it did to me. But if you want to know anything else, just ask us in the comments. Oh, great feedback. The editor is great now. Oh, the editor is great now, and it is getting even better.
Great. Happy to hear
Got
that.
a lot of exciting updates coming really soon.
Yes, basically groundbreaking features are coming along.
Robert asks, could this machine be simplified to one state with guards?
Yes.
That's a good question. Yeah, it could. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, it could be just a running state that has a cursor being updated inside the context. But as I said in the beginning of the in this session, I want to over-engineer it a little bit so that I have a way to showcase final states inside the machine.
Thank you, Martin. Martin says deterministic finite automata, that's DFA, and non-deterministic finite automata is NFA. Gosh, that's a mouthful. So let me reread Morteza's question with that. So actually, we have a non-deterministic finite automata for the carousel, and with creating the guards in the middle state for the next transition, you can simulate a deterministic finite automata. Is that correct?
I'm trying to comprehend that.
It's a lot of words, isn't it?
My understanding of the concept behind this is the way that we are representing in the carousel in final states, that means we are modeling this in a deterministic way.
Right.
And the only part that is non-deterministic is the part that is called the context. And then correct me if I'm wrong. Probably Martin can also help us with that. But that is my understanding. But then we'll wait for the reply.
We'll
in
carry
the meantime,
on. Well, yeah.
yeah. In the meantime, we need to add another action so that whenever we are mutating the cursor value inside the context, we're actually reacting to that and scrolling to the active item. So if I go from 0 to 1, which is from start state to middle state, I want the carousel to scroll between the zeroth index to the first index. So we need to add a scroll to item event here, which will pass on the implementation later. Basically, a scroll to item should be living on all of the transitions here. Okay, good for us that we have some sort of autocomplete based on the available actions here. And then we might be able to see a way to abstract this repetition away so that we don't repeat ourselves. We're gonna by adding new features to the carousel, we're gonna change the structure of the state machine so much that these probably won't stay as repetitive as they are right now. Great. So I added a scroll to item action on all of the transitions here, and then I'm going to copy the TypeScript output and then put it inside, assign it to this variable here. Great. And then maybe I also need to use the context schema definer here. Maybe I can say that because that's always missing. So I can say total maybe 7 or something. And then this will make sure that when you're getting the output of TypeScript, it has a context object and a schema set for the context and available events. So we don't have to copy that over all the time. Great. So let's do that again. Awesome. Now we don't have the TypeScript errors anymore. And we need to pass on the implementation for a scroll to item. For a scroll to item, actually, we can do a very smart thing, which is not the most intuitive API in web development, but I'm going to show you what I mean. So based on the current CTX, maybe we could do one thing. So we have access to the railref, which is a container around the carousel component in JSX. Maybe we can use that and get the current element, which is the DOM element. The current property refers to the DOM element. And we know that this is available. That's why I'm using the non-null assertion here in TypeScript. And then maybe we can do query selector all of the LA elements. Please don't judge me. I don't want to pass on like an array of refs here to get access to all of the LA elements. This is perfectly fine to me. So I'm going to query selector all the LA elements and then get the LI at the CTX cursor and then scroll into view. scrolling view gets a bunch of options here. We can say inline, which is the horizontal behavior of the scrolling. We want it to bring it to center. And that should be it, I guess. So let's put it. Yes, it's working.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. But did you see okay, cannot scroll into view. Let's see what that is. But did you see the jump inside the scrolling?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not happening anymore. That's because the scrolling to view tries to trigger the scrolling on the entire document. So even though we're telling it to bring something in line and it's scoped to that rail ref element inside JSX, it still will affect the entire document's scrolling. Anyway, so let's see what this is about. Let's go to the end and then, okay, reading scroll into view. We have the implementation here. Scroll into view. Okay, maybe, okay, yeah, I think one of the guards is faulty here. Yes. So I had the indexes from 0 to 6, but as you saw before, it was going to 7. It's because index is starting off by 1, so it's always off by 1 from the total. So we always go, because total is the length of the array, so the last element is total minus 1, but then index is also off by 1, so it's total minus 2. Great, so this is working. Now let's give it a little bit of animation. We can do that by enabling scroll behavior smooth in CSS
Very nice.
for the container, and then we'll get this perfectly fine
lovely.
carousel working. It's really shiny, isn't it? I'm proud of it.
Yeah, it's very slick. Maybe this is a really great point for me to mention. There's a website and it's called shouldIuseacarousel.com. And that is focused around the accessibility of carousels. And that is all I'm going to say on the matter.
Okay, worth mentioning that I'm no accessibility expert and I don't take any responsibilities. To me, this is zero accessible right now.
You don't take any responsibility for anything. It's no change
Not
there.
even my own implementations. Laura is a great accessibility advocate, and she has written a book on accessibility for everyone. Maybe you can check that on List Support. That's all I'm going to say, Laura, for this session.
Thank you. I don't know if I mentioned carousels in there. I think I might do, actually. Anyway, just going back through some of the questions that we've got. One of the questions was, does this editor support Chinese for the node name, event names, etc.? I'm not sure, actually.
Well, let's see. Well,
it's growing.
Okay.
Pull out some Chinese words.
I don't
see a reason why it wouldn't.
Issue. Yeah. I mean, let's put a transition, just test one here, so that we get that in the export. Yeah, it should work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the future, we'd love to actually... We'd actually love to fully translate the UI in the future as well. There's definitely something on our list for sure. Robert says the start and end states function as guards, essentially. They absolutely do in this case.
They do, yeah.
And could the incrementing actions be run within the Stately editor simulate to see the context updating? Oh, that's
yes,
cool.
This is actually when I was building the context schema feature in the studio, I thought about that and we planned it for the MVP, but then we took it out because it introduced a lot of complexity. Because even though assignment actions are supposed to be pure and only update the context of the machine, nothing stops you from running any side effects in them. So we had a way to make them secure and run them in the sandbox, which was overloaded complexity for the MVP of this feature. That's why we took it out. But then now that we're working on some other groundbreaking changes that affects context schema as well, we are thinking about upgrading simulation mode in a way that it can execute those basic assignment actions.
Yeah, simulation mode hadn't had any updates for quite a long time, and it's starting to get a lot more. And yeah, so keep an eye out.
It's going to get a lot more simpler and more intuitive to use. Also, at the same time, a lot more productive. But I can't really open up more.
Yeah. So Monteza, this is going back to the NFA DFA thing. When we have a state with two transitions with the same value, we encounter with non-finite automata. It's non-finite non-deterministic, finite automata. In the model in the middle state, there are two next transitions, one of that on the middle and another to end, so that makes it non-deterministic finite automata.
Interesting. I need to read up more about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish David was here.
Yeah, this is
He knows
exactly
more
the
about
kind of thing David specialises in. Reader of papers. Morteza asks, writing context guards and etc. in use machine, is that best practice?
That's a way to encourage keeping the state machine abstract and general purpose. So as long as you keep the stuff here and using named options, they are serializable and they encourage reusability. Because what if you want a carousel that has increment cursor implementing so that you want to scroll every 2 items? You want a different behavior with the same state, basically. So
Keeps
if
it
you
nice and
use it
readable
that
as
way,
well.
yes, exactly. If you pass on the implementations on the call side, technically speaking, then you can override the functionality that you have already inside the state chart.
Fabulous.
Great. So this is I would say this is good for the scope of an MVP of a carousel. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Great.
I mean,
great.
you might want to make it a bit pretty, but otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. There's a little reset button down below here that maybe we want to also do something about that. So the purpose of this reset button is basically mostly debugging so that we know that we start from index 0 and a state start, right? So what if I go to 4, like cursor 4 here, and then I want to quickly go back to the beginning and reset the state machine to its initial state. I want reset to do that for me. So in order for reset to work, we want an event that is available on all of these 3 states. So regardless of where you are, if you receive the reset event, you want to go back to the initial state, which is the start.
I know where you're going with this.
Yes. So what you want is a transition that's coming directly from the root node.
An inner transition, if you will.
Exactly. And then we'll soon see, like when we export the TypeScript code, we'll see that how it looks like in terms of the syntax inside the machine config. But in the studio, it looks like this. And when you receive the reset, it's not just enough to go back to the start state. We also need to reset the cursor value inside the context. Otherwise, the finite state and the infinite state are going to get out of sync. So to do that, when we receive this, we need the transition action. We can call that reset context. Then we're going to export this.
That's going to be a really cool way of debugging if you forget to do that, isn't it? If you can see the context updating in simulate mode. I've got this in my head now. I'm excited about it.
This is what I do all the time because I feel like, yeah, I'm safer if I see what's inside the context and what's the value of the state right now.
All about visualizing things.
Yes, but call me old school because you should be able to do that inside the studio already. Great. So we need to pass on the implementation for the reset context. Again, another assignment. Keep in mind that assignments or other built-in action creators from XState are action creators, which means they're not something that would magically reset the context value. They don't mutate the context. They are just a sugar syntax on top of sending an event to the machine. So when you call assign with this object, it's internally sending an internal event to the machine saying that you need to update the value of the cursor to this, to ctx.cursor plus 1. So they're just wrappers around sending internal events, if you want to think about it like that. So we're going to reset this to 0 because we always go back to 0 on resetting. And then, oh, okay, I forgot to wire this up. So on click of this, we want to send a reset event. So let's go to the 4th one and reset works. Okay, one thing we forgot to do is to execute the scroll to item action. Great, so I need to put this inside its own file so that I don't have to select and then replace. And just select all and replace in that case. So the only change that we made was on resetting the context and going back to the start event. We also need to scroll to the very first element. So we go to the fourth one, and then it works out. Great. As you can see here, we are repeating quite much. We are running scroll to item whenever we are also updating the context. Since we are doing updating the context in two different ways, sometimes we increase by one, sometimes we decrease by one, we can't probably do much about it, but the scroll to item is just plain repetitive here. So maybe instead of running them on transition actions, we can run them as entry actions. So instead of repeating the scroll to item on all of the transition actions here, maybe we can model this as an entry action, because you want to scroll to an item immediately when you enter any of these three states.
Huh.
So it's better to refactor it this way. Therefore, I can just go on and remove scroll to item from all the transition actions. Let me just add them as an entry action to all of them, to all of these states. Then I really think it's going to be an easier task later.
Oh, yeah.
It's always a pleasure to delete code. So as Laura mentioned before, this is quite manual right now, but it's going to get tremendously easier. We're making so many changes to make you a lot more productive when working with the studio, especially with these options on the machine definition, like actions, guards, invocations, and things like that.
Yeah,
Okay,
they can
now
be
that
quite hidden away and hard to update, and that is changing.
Exactly. So let's copy over the TypeScript file. I'm going to make this file called machine.ts. So it's easier for us to do this.
That's a good shout.
Then we have to import create machine. Here's autocomplete when I need it. Yeah, okay, so this works. So instead of having the machine inline inside this file, we're going to call this Carousel machine and import it as a default import from, let's call it machine, yes, machine.ts. And instead of having this here, I can remove it entirely. So when I copy this, my life is now easier because I can just, maybe it's not that easier, but I can just do this with a shortcut.
It's still, you don't have to scroll down or anything. That's
Exactly.
Saves a bit time.
So how this looks like now is we remove the scroll to item from all the transition actions in favor of adding them to the entry actions inside these three states. So instead of having them in like 6 different places, we now reduce that to 3 places. Great. So let's verify that it works. Not working. Oh, okay. I know what's that. There is a concept in XState or Statecharts in general called internal or external transitions. That means if you're going from start to middle, since the value of a state changes, it's an external transition by default. But when you're going from middle to middle, it's an internal because you're not changing the target. So you need to tell XState explicitly that this is an external transition. So here, when we go on next inside middle state, we go to middle, we're not changing the target, so we need to say internal is false. Internal is false. To make this explicitly an external transition so that we run the entry action, because entry actions don't re-execute if you're inside an internal transition. So this way, oh my God, okay. I misjudged. It's not about that. Interesting. Okay. This goes to middle, and then middle. This should have worked. I'm saying it's not internal. Do I have a typo somewhere? Let's see. Middle to middle is not internal. Yeah, this should be the case. Okay, maybe I need to also, I'm not sure about this. I don't think it matters, but The way to learn XState, by the way. Doesn't matter how much you work with it. Yes, I had to redeclare the target because I'm marking this as an external transition. Okay, this is a great gotcha. I honestly didn't know that before. Maybe we can explain why that's the case with Mateusz or David later. But anyway,
I was just trying to look it up because I'm pretty sure this is something that's slightly different in V5 and slightly more straightforward.
Probably,
if I
yeah.
remember
This
rightly.
might be an unwanted feature right now. Yeah, this probably is much better and more intuitive in V5, and this should have been documented. If it's not documented, I mean, like, I don't remember the documentation like all over right now, but I don't know. Maybe Laura, do you remember if this is part of the documentation?
I don't think so, but I do in fact think that Kevin may have written a blog post that has not been published yet about it. Should we just very quickly go to some of our questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Going back to the discussion about where you put your actions, Robert says, personally, I inject actions when they need to be parameterized at runtime, but some actions make sense as inherent to the machine, like incrementing and clamping the carousel index.
Yeah, that makes sense. The reason I kept them as transition actions is because I know what's going to happen to the structure of the machine when we add future features. It's going to change so that it can't live on the root node right now. But I mean, for now, yes, you're right. Based on this current config, it can be lifted up to the root of the machine, like reset event.
And Robert also says, I'm not currently aware of why serializability matters.
Well, serializability matters if you want to send the config of the machine dynamically from server to client or the other way. Or maybe it matters for people who really care about reusability and then providing different implementation based on the same serializable name. It also matters when you're trying to port the state machine between different languages or different stacks. As long as you have it, because if you have it as a JSON config, it's JSON serializable, so you can port it almost anywhere that JSON can be parsed.
Cool. Martin says, and this is when we were talking about being able to keep track of like keeping the cursor and the context in sync. Martin says, I also like to use inspect for keeping track of everything.
Yeah, that works.
Not going to chat about inspect today, but
yeah, I think what Martin is referring to is the XState inspect package. It's like simulating a machine, but it's not just pure simulation. It's actually connected to your machine live. So if you update your machine through the UI, like those buttons here, at the bottom here, the inspector will also receive an event through post message and update the context and visualization accordingly. And similarly, the other way, if you update or trigger an event onto the machine inside the inspector UI, it will also use post message, pass it back to your view. So they are completely in sync with each other. The only reason I'm not using inspector right now is because it will prompt to the like a new tab. It's like I'm going to open it in a new tab, right, in the browser. On every change, it's going to prompt me and show me that tab. I didn't want to do that inside the stream because I felt like it's a lame and annoying. That's all.
Yeah. Mosesa asks, can we use immer instead of assign?
Because assign works in a special way in XState, if you really want to use immer for updating, you're going to have to use assign from XState/immer. Because there is a XState/immer package that makes immer updates and patches compatible with XState. So you're going to have to import assign from here instead of XState. That's all you need.
Great. And Morteza also asked, one state with 3 transitions isn't enough. Next previous reset transitions. Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, we've kind of expanded this machine slightly just to help make it easier to show some of the principles of state machines. We 100% agree this would be a good way to refactor this machine. And interestingly, so back to your issue with the internal transitions, Robert says, I've run into this problem with internal transitions before, didn't find the solution. All right, we'll be nagging Mateusz and David about this later.
Yeah, so to just reconfirm, the solution is to redeclare the target, even though it's the same as the state right now.
Okay.
And I went on and marked the transition, the prev and next transitions that go from middle to middle as external here in the studio. Yeah, just out of curiosity, this is the way to do it. So if you mark this as external when you're exporting, then you're going to get them as this. So the target is really clear. So I should have just
Great.
done it through a studio.
Hey, that's a good thing that the studio does it better than the code. We are finding that increasingly.
Yes. Okay. So this is the basic state machine so far. Maybe we have time for adding one other feature, and then maybe we can continue in subsequent sessions later.
Great.
Yeah. So maybe we can go on and add, I don't know, lazy loading images.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Okay. So what I mean by lazy loading is like usually when carousels have lazy loading, they try to not load the images that are outside the viewport or outside of the visible window of the carousel right now. In other words, if the item with cursor 0 is right now active, we only load that image. And since the other ones are not yet visible, we don't load them until they're being visible. But I don't want to model it that way. Maybe we can refactor it like that later. The way I want to model lazy loading, it's not lazy loading, but rather full control over loading images, so that we make sure all the images of the carousel are loaded, and if at least one of them failed to load, then we want to give way to the user to reload the entire carousel. Because if you have a carousel that's missing at least one images, it's not going to look great. And
So
depending
how
on
is
how
this
you,
lazy loading?
it's not lazy loading. It's just lazy loading in the sense
Okay.
that I named it lazy loading.
Right, okay.
Tell you what, we model it this way so that we have control over loading all the images at once in parallel. And then next session, we work on making it actual lazy loading.
Cool. This is like full back loading.
Yeah, sort of. Like batch loading. If that makes sense. Great. All right. So to do that, we need to refactor a little bit, because whatever we have right now inside the state machine shouldn't exist until everything is loaded. So the state machine changes in a way that we now need more states. Let's call them loading, because we want to start from a state that all the images are pending to be loaded yet. Then if something goes wrong and at least one of the images fails to load, we want to go to failed. And then if everything loaded like completely fine, then we transition to the loaded state. And whatever we have right now should only exist under that. This is what we call compound states in XState and Statecharts. This means
We call it parent and child states. We're
exactly
phasing away from compound states.
right.
They still are compound states, but it's just a bit easier to understand.
Do we want to keep nested states?
No, we're saying parent and child, but I mean, you can still say it's nested. People will understand what you mean.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me select all of them and see if I can reparent them under loaded. Hopefully
Does that work?
I hope so. They work, yes. Did they? Maybe they not. Didn't. Yes, they did. Great.
Oh, this is great.
Okay, so
Robert says, I love Stately Studio. I've been showing it while interviewing for jobs and getting good reactions. And today I learned you can double click on the canvas to add a new state. That is one benefit to Farzad's really noisy mouse, is that you could identify that. But yeah, double click on the canvas and you get a new state.
I'm sorry about that. I don't hear the like the annoying sound of my mouse or my mechanical keyboard, so I keep getting this feedback from one person.
It's me. I have a vendetta against mechanical keyboards.
All right, getting back to the state chart. Now we need to tweak the initial state of the carousel machine to start from the loading state. And then we want to, okay, so assuming that we're writing a promise-based service to load the images for us, using fetch or image DOM API or something, it's still going to have a promise interface. So we can invoke that as an invocable promise inside the state machines. In XState, you can invoke multiple things. You can invoke promises, you can invoke callbacks, you can invoke observables, you can invoke other machines. But for now, data fetching in general is a promise-based concept, so we can invoke that as a promise. Assume that we are invoking something here. Actually, instead of assuming, let's just go and add an invoke character. Let's call it load images. Let's also add an ID to it, so that we can refer to it if it's needed. Okay. So we invoke this load images service, which goes on and creates, like, tries to load like all the 10 or 7 or whatever the total number of images is into the memory,
Would you
and then
zoom in the machine slightly just at that point?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Great. So it loads all the images, and at the end returns an array of a string, and these strings represent the source of the image. So once we load them in memory, the HTTP request is already made, so they're cached in the browser level. So we assign them to the image inside JSX, and without loading them again, we get the image, which means basically caching. So invocations, like promise invocations in XState, have 2 implicit events that are required. One of them is called the done invocation event, and another one is called the error invocation. They represent the fulfillment or the rejection of a promise. So we say if load images is resolving to an array of strings, which means all the images are loaded, we want to transition to the loaded state so the rest of the carousel can work. Otherwise, if something fails, we want to go to the fail state. And in fail state, we probably later on want to add like a reload event to give the user a way to reload the carousel without having to reload the entire page. One thing before I forget is we attach the reset button to the root of the machine, but now we probably don't want to reset anything until everything is loaded. So we want to remove that and basically change the source from being the root of the machine to the loader. Great.
Lovely.
Yes, I think everything is good. Let's also add the reload event here so that we can also add the button to it later. On reload, we want to give the user a chance to reload the entire thing. So basically, we want to start the scenario from scratch. If you didn't have a Statecharts, you probably had to do a little more manual work to make the reloading work. But all you need to do inside this Statechart is to transition back to the loading state. And everything just works out of the box. Because Statecharts, in a way, represent scenarios or user flows. And all you need to do is to go to the state that makes sense to restart a scenario. They kind of give you a vibe of like a flashback to the old go-to statement in old programming languages. Sort of like. Anyway, let's get the code for this because we need to provide the implementation for load images invocation here and see if this actually works.
Just while you're pasting that in, Matesa said, cycle in Carousel is a feature. That means with the next image to the end, you return to the first. Yeah, that is the way that a normal carousel would work, but this is a Farzad carousel, and so it doesn't work that way.
We'll get to that. That's the future we're going to have. Just bear with me. Great. So now that we have the invocation, let's see how it looks like. So we changed the initial state from being start to being loading now. Okay, so I can see that the middle state hasn't been reparented under loaded. Maybe the reparenting didn't work with multi-selection. So maybe we need to reparent them one by one. I remember David said that it doesn't work with multi-selection right now.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Okay, so now middle should go under loaded. Great, I think it works now. And then end also should go under the loaded.
And, Robert likes the reparenting feature, and Martin says, today I learned you can change the parent from the side panel instead of shamelessly copy and pasting everything into it. Well, the copy and pasting didn't used to work, and the side panel used to be the only way you could do it.
Yes.
So you are, it's kind of gone the other way around. It's not ideal. It can be a bit tricky sometimes to work out. If you've got a lot of nested states, it can be quite tricky to work it out from the drop down. So sometimes copy pasting.
Yes, easier. Especially because with the current design on production, we yet don't see the depth of the states. But again, I'm teasing you because this is going to come soon. But what I want from reparenting ideally is a way to select anything I want and then like have a modifier key pressed like Alt and something and then drag it onto another state and it would work. That's the
Yeah, that'd be
optimal
cool.
workflow for reparenting. Yeah. And this is
Yeah.
something that we know, but we just have to ship things in MVP scope and then later on improve them.
But if
okay,
you
so
do have anything specific that you would like us to add with more urgency than others, you should let us know. statelyai.canny.io. We have a roadmap there, but you can also add feature requests and upvote other people's, and that we
Yes.
can use that to help us prioritize what we're working on.
exactly.
Sorry.
And if you're
Go back to it.
no worries. And if you also have the premium subscription with the studio, you get like the prioritized support from our team over different services. So feature request is also one of those priority requests.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so we by reparenting inside the state machine, I copy pasted everything here to the config, and now we start from the loading state. We invoke a load images service. On done, we go to loaded, and on error, we go to fail. One thing we need to remember is, since load images is going to load all the images in memory, it will give you all the array sources, right? The sources of the images. So we need to have like an assignment to save that in context so later on we can use it. So on load images, we want to add an action called save images, for example, which saves the images it receives from the promise service onto the context. And I don't yet care about the error message to be shown anywhere. I know that they fail, so at any time it failed, I just want to give them a way to reload. We don't particularly care about the error message in this case. Great. So remaining thing here is to provide the implementation for this loads images service. To do that, similar to guards, context, and actions, you can also pass implementation to services. We can call that load images. I'm going to grab a load images, like the pre-made load images code that I have here, because I don't want to spend some time re-implementing that. And if you look at it, it's not going to be anything.
No, it's not fancy.
Yeah. So it basically takes. Okay, so I don't need that one.
Yeah.
I thought that's the same name inclusion. Anyway, load images. Call that load images. It's a service that returns a promise, and it uses the image DOM API. Sets the same dimension that we have here inside the constant variable onto this image constructor. Says if the image is loaded, resolve with the source. If there's an error, reject this promise so that we have a way to transition to the failed state. And there's a deliberate 2 seconds delay here because it's so fast that I want to simulate some delays here. To start this, this whole loading flow of the image, we set the source to a random image source that we get from this get image URL function. All we need to do here is to say load images is this promise, like this function that returns promise. Okay. So one remaining thing is we probably want to show something. Let's take a look at the state here. You see that for 2 seconds it's loading, and then it goes to loaded. But there is an image. It's because we're using get image URL statically here based on this static array. So we no longer need to do that because we're going to get the images from the state machine. So we probably have to pass this here. We probably can say array.from length. I'm going to create an array by the length of total number, whatever that is, and then map that over to. This is going to be the default. I just want an array with that size. I don't have to map it anywhere. I want to fix an array with the size of total items so that later on, the save images action that it passed to the state machine and assign them the images property inside the context. Now, invocations in XState, either they fail or they resolve, they come back with a data property on the event. So the invocation, when it's resolved or rejected, will send an internal event to the state machine with a data property on the event. And this event is this incoming event that you can access here. Almost all the signatures for the machine options in XState follow the same function interface, where this is a function that gets the context of the machine as the first parameter and the incoming event as a second parameter. This is so predictable that you don't even have to look up APIs. Sometimes it just works because everything is consistent thanks to Matush and David. So when the data property comes with the incoming event, it carries on the array of sources, and we save that onto the context. we probably need to add the images array to the context here as well. Let's say that by default it's also new array with that length. I can change that to be 5 or something so we don't have the same number here. And then this is showing an error because it's missing from the context schema. All I'm going to say is that it's an array of strings. Okay, so it's to satisfy type state, I need to just map it over to a string. Say whatever this is, get the index and then string on the index. Sometimes TypeScript gets in the way. Okay, and also similarly, we need to do this here when we pass it because this is also following the same schema. Great. Now this images is going to come from the machine context, and the context is a property on the current state of the machine. So we need to say state.context.images.map. Let's see what's going on. So we have save images. Great. And this is also inside the context. Great. We have that in the schema. Save images comes here with the data. Awesome. Do you have load images, which takes this? Sounds good. And then state.context of images. Let me just put the console up here. Let's debug this together. Okay. So images is a single string, which means, yeah, I'm not making an array. Makes sense. So load images should be a service that uses the current context and probably returns the promise.all for concurrent loading of these images. And we can say array.from length of the CTX for total items. That map.
Length spelled wrong.
Okay. Okay, so this map should be inside. Great. Okay, so we have the images. They're working. The image should be. So this is correct. So the images are loaded, and we have an array of 7 strings here. State.context.images. This should have works. What's going on? If anyone spots anything, let me know. Let's call that load image because it's a little confusing. Because, yeah. Great. I am testing that as the SRC of the image.
Yeah, but it looks like it's replacing it looks like it's replacing everything. Oh, there you go. Your
No.
images are below.
Oh my god, yeah, this is great.
Said
Yeah,
Martin.
because I was, yeah.
Because we zoomed in and we covered out with the console.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. But this is annoying, right? We are showing everything as not loaded images until we transition to the loaded state. To work around this, we need to make sure that we conditionally render these items inside the carousel only when we are already inside the loaded state. To do that, you can use tags in XState. There is also a state that matches, but since matches is completely coupled to the structure of the machine, if you later on refactor the structure of the machine, state.matches might no longer work. So the best way to do that, I would recommend using tags. So you can add tags to the machine and then later on check against that and reason based on that inside the view layer. You can say the tag is loaded, and all you need to do here is to say, I want the entire carousel. Maybe do this, yeah. State.hasTag. So state.tags property is a set of the names of the tags. And then if this is the case, if there is a tag, we want to render everything. You can see that nothing renders inside the carousel
Nice.
unless we are already inside the loaded state. Okay, so let's verify that. Okay. Why are they not working? Because we didn't change anything, right? These events should have been already handled here. We are in loaded and then we are... it's because I'm missing the initial state here. I forgot to add the initial state here. What happened? Okay. And then now we start from loaded start. And since we are already in loaded start, okay, so this goes to loaded, and loaded should start from initial state. Something is going on, probably. It's stuck on loading. But the context is here.
The initial state.
Yeah.
Is the start state, is what you're saying there.
Yeah. I'm saying when we enter the loaded state, the child state needs to start from start. Exactly.
All right, yeah. So that's not it.
Okay, let me go on and add this to the studio, and maybe it shows me my stupid
then we'll get
mistake.
a visual debugging.
Okay. Just put it this way so that you understand that this is... okay, there's a bug in the studio. Nice. This is an array. Maybe need to... This is a bug that I need to investigate later. Well, let's call it an array for now. And then it will be added to the schema. Yes, great. Okay, now what we need to do is to add the same thing here to make sure that it understands that. So when we reparent, we didn't get a warning here that there is no initial state under loaded, which is something we need to also investigate because this sounds like a bug.
Oh, yeah, that is a good... Oh, no, because it can still get to it from the... Oh, no, it does still need an initial state, though. Yeah. I'll write it down.
Interesting. So the initial state was marked as a start, but there was no initial state indicator on it before. Now it's indicating that and still showing it. So let me check the code here. Yes, this is now here. Great. Let me also just... I don't know if you have the tag support on production. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we don't have the tag support. Yeah, maybe I can just add that later. Let me just copy this over and then add the tag myself. So loaded will get a tag. It's stuck on loading and there is no error. That is very weird.
Martin says, could it be that when you changed the... Oh, no, you couldn't... Yeah. When you changed parent, it didn't assign an initial state. But yes, now we've got an initial state.
Interesting. Let me check the console. Maybe there's an error. Okay, cannot respond if I scroll into view. It's because of conditional rendering. I wonder why Stackbase didn't show me any errors here. It's because of this conditional rendering, because I'm not making them available. So I need to push this down onto the LA itself, because I want the LA element to be always available.
Right.
Okay. Let me see. Okay, so I want the LA to always be available, but inside the UL, I have a list that I want to be conditional, so interesting. I want the P element there, great. Okay.
Oh, you said inside of.
Okay, yeah. I was moving this one. So all I need to do is to move this condition inside. So I still need to move, loop over this, but
Huh.
I maybe need to do this. Thinking about a solution here. We need the fragments. Okay. Awesome. Whew, work. Great. Awesome. So let's
Yay.
refresh again. It's in loading. Nothing is shown. Great. And then load at start. Awesome. So to simulate the error behavior, the failing flow, in Chrome DevTools, you get a thing called request blocking. I'm going to go on and enable it and then block the request domain for these images and see how the error handling flow works. So it's in loading, and in 2 seconds, it should go to failed. Great. So as we know, we already have the reload event available on the failed state. Maybe we want to add another button that says, if we are inside the failed state, and we're going to add the tag later, we want this button to show up that sends reload to the machine. So we can, okay. Oh, because I forgot to add the tag. So it fails now, reload takes me back to loading, and everything works. So let me re-enable this, unblock it, and it should now load the images. Perfect.
Yay.
Worked. Great. So we have been streaming for about 75 minutes now. Laura, what do you think? Do we want to add another small feature, or do we want to maybe postpone them to a subsequent
I think
session?
we should save some more features for the future.
Yes.
I think you've already showed how easy it is. I mean, tricky issues aside, to add a new feature to the carousel. And so in the future, we can add even more.
Exactly. And in future sessions, we're going to continue modeling these carousel elements. And you'll see that the more we add features, the more linear the whole process of modeling will get. Basically, state charts are sort of against the complexity. The more complex and the more features you have, the better the state chart can handle it. And the more minimal the number of changes.
Karmik says it
see that
wasn't
later.
XState's fault, though. Yeah, it wasn't XState's fault, not
No,
at
it's
all.
always a developer's
XState makes
fault.
it really easy.
Yeah, but honestly, it's really easy for me to track where the problem is happening, because state charts kind of read like plain English to me, read like scenarios. And it's easy for me to trace bugs by verifying what's happening, because they give you like a really, really good fine-grained control over how things are working and in when and what order. So if it was a soup of use effects and state updates, I can guarantee you that we wouldn't have spotted all these bugs so fast.
Absolutely. Oh, and Robert has a suggestion of showing pairing with ChatGPT or Copilot. That is certainly possible as well. David does that a lot.
Yeah, well, I do that too, but sometimes it fails me, but it understands XState pretty well. GPT model and also Copilot, GitHub Copilot, they both are really great at suggesting changes to state charts.
We'll have to find a way of seeding it with the V5 updates to XState as well, so it doesn't start suggesting.
That would be
people always
possible. I think if the community starts using it, that would be a good seeding on its own. But yeah, you're right. You probably need like a faster way of doing it.
We're training all the models for them, aren't we?
Yes.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for the help with the debugging and the suggestions, and thank you for your questions and your comments. We really appreciate you joining us live here, and we will be back very soon with another webinar. If you have any ideas that you want to share with us, you can let us know on our Discord. Our Discord is at discord.gg/xstate. I mean, that says XState Discord. It is the Stately and XState Discord. I should probably update that. Or just let us know on social media what you want to see, and we will try and do our best to accommodate it. And any final words that you wanted to say, Farzad?
No, just thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to build things next to, like, along with the community. And we really appreciate your feedback in the live chat. We look forward to making
Absolutely.
more things with you.
And I think now I'm going to go off and see if I can find some pizza.
For sure.
See you later, everyone. Bye bye.
Have a good day. Bye bye.